There's always been dramatic baptism at the Easter Vigil. Augustine describes a memorable baptism in his Confessions. It was in Rome in the middle of the 4th century at night at the Easter Vigil. It was the custom for the candidates to profess their faith publicly before they were baptized. But when this particular man stepped out of the crowd and walked to the platform to profess his faith, people were electrified. It was Gaius Marius Victorinus, the famous Neoplatonic philosopher, the translator of Aristotle into Latin, professor of rhetoric in the city of Rome, an official position that held senatorial rank. He was so revered that he had been awarded a statue in the Forum, an honor usually reserved for the dead, so an exception had to be made for him. This Victorinus, pride of the pagan intellectual world, was going to be baptized. And as he came forward, the crowd fell silent with attention. And then he started to speak. And so eloquently did this professor of rhetoric declare his confidence in the Christian faith that Augustine tells us all the people who heard him longed to clasp him tenderly to their hearts. Baptism has always been dramatic because its claims are dramatic. As Paul writes to the church in Rome, all who are baptized into Christ are baptized into his death. And just as Christ was raised from the dead, so we also walk in newness of life. And so the lights you saw tonight, the sound, the dance, the music, all of this here in our cathedral tonight are our 21st century ways of communicating the dramatic power of baptism. What Augustine did with his words in his Confessions, we use technology to help shape this moment. But baptism, while it is always dramatic, is not a drama. It is never a drama. It is not a story with a beginning, middle, and end. It is not a narrative that proceeds in a simple, linear fashion. Instead, everything that we have experienced from the evening of Maundy Thursday to Good Friday and now tonight at the Vigil, they are a unity. They are each aspects of the same Easter story. Canon Suarez reminded us of this truth yesterday in her powerful homily. At the cross, she said, we are confronted in what ought to be the moment of greatest agony and shame with what is God's greatest glory. And so the reverse is also true. In the hope and glory of Easter, in the midst of all this dramatic power, we find the pain and horror of Good Friday. And it must be so. Otherwise, our faith is nothing but a fantasy. Otherwise, all these lights and music and sound and dance that we experience tonight are nothing but elements of a dramatic play. If we don't understand the unity of these past 3 days, then we may be led to believe that the suffering of Good Friday is followed, like clockwork, by the victory of Easter just a few days later. We may believe that suffering can so easily or so quickly be overcome. That is wishful thinking. Life does not work like this. Instead, Maundy Thursday, Good Friday, and Easter form a single whole. In the midst of pain, there is new life. But in the midst of new life, there is pain. When the disciples saw the resurrected Jesus, they could feel and touch his wounds, the scars from the nails driven through his wrists, and from the spear that pierced his side. In the resurrection, Jesus was given new life, not permanent healing and erasure of all the wounds that he ever received. And if this is true for Jesus, then it is also true for us. In our baptism, our sins are washed away, not our wounds. We walk in the newness of life, still vulnerable to pain and suffering. And yet the promise of this night is that no matter how terrible the suffering, no matter how unbearable the pain, it is not the end. Our scar tissue may still be healing as we come out of the water, and our wounds too raw to touch, but we have been reborn. We are alive. The darkness did not, will not, and will never overcome the light. New life awaits. New life always awaits.